Welcome to a CNBC Africa special. My name is Arnold Kwizera, and today the conversation is on the green economy and how this can help us bounce back after COVID-19. It's the world versus the virus. Now we have a distinguished panel of experts to help us break this down, and I'll start by introducing Mr. Marshall Banamwana. He's the Acting Director General of Environment and Climate Change at the Rwanda Ministry of Environment. So we also have Mr. Luther Ankur. Welcome back, Mr. Luther, Regional Director of Eastern and Southern Africa at IUCN. And Mr. Okechukwu Daniel, who's the Lead Program Coordination at Triple GI Rwanda, based out of here, Kigali, Rwanda. Now, gentlemen, I just want to start with what the United Nations Secretary General said recently on World Earth Day, where he noted that COVID-19 is a wake-up call demanding recovery to be built around the green economy. And my question going out there to Mr. Marshall is, does the pandemic give us a chance to fast-track the green economy?
There is, this pandemic came as a surprise, and it has affected many sectors, and many sectors ranging from transport, hotels, tourism, ecotourism. Many sectors were really affected. And I think it gave us a wake-up call to rethink on how we are dealing with our economy. And I think it's really a challenge to help us really think deeper to how we should move on, how we can live with this pandemic, but at the same time, how we can even cope with the changing environment.
Conversation. Is this the opportunity, unfortunately?
It's, as you put it, it's a little bit unfortunate, but if you are to follow the trends that we have been having globally, there's been no time like this one where the world should take advantage of what we have learned. So basically, COVID-19 falls in the category of natural disasters that has greatly disrupted human livelihoods, economic activity, and led to both loss of lives and livelihoods, and created illness. And overall, a green economy is basically trying to is a concept that is basically underlying the fact that the global economy is very linked to the state of the environment. So there is no other time like this one to rebuild better.
Out there, you're working with some of the policy makers, and what do they feel about the direction that should be taken in terms of enforcing the green economy?
When it comes to the unfortunate experience of the coronavirus, is one that we shouldn't miss as people, but also most importantly, when you look at it from the government point of view, there are several recovery plans, stimulus packages that are being crafted. One thing that is very obvious is that we can't go back to the same way we do business. And that's exactly what we as an organization in GGGI do support or advise our government to think through, green growth. Because when you look at the unfortunate incident of the coronavirus, you realize that it calls for real action that is not only thinking in the immediate terms, but those that will look into the medium, but also the long-term sustainability of the way we grow our economies.
With you, Daniel, and I want you to break it down for us. Is this, could we take this as some kind of wake-up call?
Absolutely. This is a wake-up call, but an unfortunate one, if I should say, for the fact that, the way we've grown our economy, we've done our development in the past years, have seen us, destroying the environment, polluting the air, Our energy sources are not clean. Therefore, it calls for us to really sit up and ask ourselves the hard questions. Should we continue through this path? And that is where, for us as an organization, we look at it from a green growth path, where we think that governments across the world should sit up to now think through what is the need for us to move, have a paradigm shift from business as usual to a green economy pathway.
You back into the conversation. You as a government leader out there, you as someone who has been part of the signings of some of the climate change agreements world over. We had the Paris 2020 agreement, that green agreement that was signed recently, and before that we had one in Singapore, one in Canada. But commitment by global leaders towards this, case in point, you have a situation whereby the leader of the free world, quote unquote, Donald Trump, pulled out of the Paris Agreement. Now, how do you get your fellow leaders across different governments to buy into this?
You put it well. We are in an unfortunate situation whereby some of the global leaders ignored the findings from long-term scientific research and all the IPCC report, the report which is made by a number of commendable, highly scientists globally who came up with the imminent threat which the world is facing with the climate change. And it's really a bad situation whereby, whether politically motivated or whether influenced by other interests, some global leaders try to ignore these warnings from the eminent researchers. And it's important to note that also facts are there, because the weather is changing, disasters are happening all over the world, and drought, famine, and the various disasters are happening. So it's important that countries like you mentioned build on existing facts and try to work together toward improving our ways of working. Daniel put it well. We are no longer in a situation whereby we are going to be working in a business as usual. We need to have the innovative solutions to work together as countries toward just our commitment to the Paris Agreement. For your information, Rwanda also submitted recently its revised national determined contribution, whereby we need to take a lead and really make sure that we call upon other countries also to work with us toward achieving this global international commitment.
Committing is one thing, practicality is the other thing. And, meeting some of these emission targets that had been set, or very few countries are even trying to meet the targets that were set in these agreements. How do we get it to be practical? How do we get these commitments to be enforced in a practical manner?
Yeah. Commitment is the fact, it's something, but commitment also, it's a starting point, because it shows the political will and the need, or the need to act. You understand, after commitment, there is also the time to act, which sometimes require financial resources, which require capacity, which require a shift in mindset, which require also a cooperation, because we are not facing the same threat, and we are not, even the consequences, the magnitude are not the same. So we need that cooperation, we need that financial resources available, and we need the kind of shift in mindset to make sure that whatever we are doing, we need to take care for the generations to come.
I think the attitudes of people like President Donald Trump is going to change as a result of COVID-19, especially towards going green?
Well, I mean, if we put it into context, it is clear that we have had those we call the climate deniers. And I wouldn't say that the coronavirus will immediately erase that attitude, including those of presidents or individuals who have decided to throw the way of, brown growth. But the fact is that as we are seeing the fast pace, unintended maybe consequences of the coronavirus pandemic, we are also sitting on the slower and continuous impacts of climate change. So in my opinion, I would say that such deniers is a sort of distraction for us to actually focus on the practical ways that we could support each other globally, whether it be through government partnership, private sector, civil society organization, to tackle the impacts of climate change.
To the conversation, you might have missed me there. What kind of accountability measures can we put in place to ensure that countries go ahead to enforce these agreements that they sign?
Well, as you know, first and foremost, the agreements are basically signed first and foremost based on whatever legislative frameworks are put in place, but also most importantly, it's based on goodwill, and this goodwill is, as we are looking at it at this point, should go beyond just leaders who are signing to actually going to the becoming a societal issue. And I think the big promising thing that we are noticing at this point is that even with the coronavirus, the discussions are shifting slightly beyond just what governments can do to what do we need to do as a people. And I think as societies begin to acknowledge the fact and recognize the fact that we do need to build global resilience, we do need to be mindful of how we use and manage natural resources. I think that is certainly going to be the main place that's going to drive change. I don't think that change will only arise from mere signing of documents. I think it is from a whole society understanding and appreciating issues which are quite important to the survival of the human race. And I think that this is where we find ourselves at the moment.
Luther, coming out of this COVID-19 pandemic, we don't know when we are going to actually come out of it, but coming out of it, when we look at the conversations right now, conversations before it regarding climate change, they seem to have been shelved. Now, are we able to combat this issue of climate change as we tackle the COVID-19 pandemic, or is it something that we need to put at the back of our minds and then bring it back later after we've dealt with the COVID-19 situation, or it can go hand in hand?
No, I think it should go hand in hand, and this is the big opportunity, because this is the chance for us to actually, as we're doing recovery, we do need to restructure the economies accordingly. And I think that there is need, for example, right away, if you look at the African setting, we do need to restructure our value chains to ensure that there's efficient use of natural resources. We do need to build stronger resilience. We do need to make sure that there's market creation that takes into consideration the aspects of the opportunities that green growth does provide. So I think that this is the right opportunity. We wouldn't need to to let this pass, because huge investments. I think you're hearing of every country trying to rearrange its physical and monetary policies towards to support recovery. And I think that if we do all of this hand in hand, taking into consideration environmental concerns, then we will be getting it right.
Great that there you mentioned the fiscal and monetary policy aspect, and the major part of this is to deal with the issue of employment. Now, Mr. Daniel Okechukwu, we'll bring you back into this conversation. Do we need to have some kind of trade-offs or synergies between financing economic recovery and possibly transitioning towards some form of sustainability? Because if we are to move towards this green economy, then jobs are going to be lost, new jobs are going to be created. The unemployment gap may be bigger than what we are dealing with right now.
Well, I mean, it would be good to point out correctly that, green economic growth have actually started creating new jobs. What maybe society lacks, or governments or different institutions lack, is what I would call retooling or capacity building for people to move into the evolving jobs. Takes, an example of renewable energy. There is a huge move towards the use of solar energy, wind power, and these are creating jobs where there used to be no more jobs. So the fact that the coronavirus have called for governments to rethink about economic growth also presents an opportunity to now start looking at those drivers of growth within each country. Let's say, for instance, in the transport sector, how can you not only think of the motorized transport system, but also the non-motorized transport system? How can you start thinking in the energy sector to have a balance or even a big shift from fossil fuel energy investment to renewable energy? And when you even talk of issues related to natural resource use, biodiversity loss, there are quite a huge opportunity to shift our investment, in all the recovery plans that we are seeing countries come up with. And as you shift this investment, it also creates new jobs. And what you may need is actually to give a bit of a brush up or retooling of people's capacity for them to move from the jobs that are maybe polluting or non-sustainable to the sustainable job.
Mr. Marshall, just to piggyback off what Daniel is saying, he's saying the green economy is going to create jobs, and it has already started creating jobs in some countries that have taken that direction. But one believes that the number of jobs vis-a-vis the number of people who may lose jobs if we move towards the green economy direction is not what's needed at the moment, that jobs are less in the green economy. And right now, governments are thinking more people-centric and less of green. How do we get this synergy, or is it a trade-off?
Yeah, I think Daniel put it well. Some jobs will be lost, but also there is an opportunity for further jobs which are going to be created, especially in renewable energy, in waste management, in some other sectors. But of course, for the first time, I think it's gonna be hard because people have to think and work at the same time with the recovery on each of the sectors. But I'm optimistic, but as long as time comes when people will get adapted to the new changes, to the period after the pandemic, people will start also creating more jobs. Of course, some will be lost, but there is, to me, I'm optimistic that with time, as people get to adapt to the impact of the pandemic, we will have to get the economy back to the track. And of course, it will require the resilience of each country, the motivation, and even the innovative ways to adapt to today's changes.
Luther, just before we go into a commercial break, what's your take on this, the need for this kind of trade-off or synergy, and in relation to the economic impact of the pandemic, which is going to force many countries to be more people-centric and less green-centric?
First of all, I think Daniel mentioned at the beginning that we will not go back to what we used to call normal. A number of things are going to change. I think the functioning of the world itself is going to change. So economic systems and all the other various social systems are going to be affected or are already affected. So just simply returning back to the way we used to do things is not going to be the best approach to move forward. And oftentimes society has, when faced with huge challenges in the past, whether you look at the pandemics in the past, or you look at the major depressions of the past, or you look at major wars, whatever challenges society faced globally, they came out of it with new innovations. So the best hope, the hope is there at this point that what is only needed is for governments to provide enabling environments or conditions for which the private sector can innovate. And we are going to find new innovations coming on board in terms of the green in the green economy. And so I think that's really the gist of it. It's not necessarily going to be simply go back to the old jobs which were available. And within the green economy, let's not forget that for Africa, a lot of the jobs are still in the agricultural sector. And so I think there's a huge opportunity to really harness that.
Mr. Marshall, just before we go into this quick commercial break, what are those opportunities that you seem to see in the green economy?
The opportunities are in many sectors. I can mention the recycling. I can mention renewable energy. I can mention opportunities in agriculture, as my colleague mentioned. I can mention also opportunity in innovative solutions like technology and I mentioned recycling as well. I can also mention the energy. There are many opportunities. I can't go in deep to explain at which level, but especially these are the key areas which I think the private sector, all other investors need to look in specifically to try to generate or to create more jobs.
Is this what the world needs? Is this what could possibly rescue us? Now with us we have a panel of experts, Mr. Marshall Banamwana, who is the Acting Director General of Environment and Climate Change at the Rwanda Ministry of Environment. We also have Mr. Luther Ankur, who is the Regional Director for Eastern and Southern Africa at IUCN, and Mr. Okechukwu Daniel, who is the Lead Program Coordinator at GGI Rwanda. Now, just want to start with you, Mr. Daniel, in regards to areas or sectors or activities that could possibly be prioritized in a new Green Deal, given the economic crisis and competing claims that are coming up at the moment.
If there will be a global new Green Deal, which of course we've seen some countries or blocks towing that path, it should be centered around people, what we call inclusive growth. So whether we are dealing with renewable energy, electric mobility or non-motorized transport, waste to energy, waste to resources, it has to be around people, so that this also serves as an opportunity to bridge the gap or the inequality between the rich and the poor. So when you look at it, each country do have their medium or long-term strategy. And what this opportunity calls for in terms of rejigging these strategies to become a new Green Deal could be a possibility of looking at those engines of growth or drivers of growth. Let's take, for example, in countries that have been going through challenges of traffic congestion, this could be a good time to start thinking much more beyond just areas like bus rapid transport, but also creating more opportunities for those who would like to cycle to their destination. But also in areas of urban planning, cities will no longer have to go the way they used to be. The opportunity calls for countries to start thinking about creating more green spaces. Public places should be public so that there will be more room for people to increase their well-being or the quality of life affected positively. So there is a lot of co-benefits when people work in an integrated manner. So it's not a cherry-picking exercise, if I could say, but there will be a deeper thinking of how countries can holistically link all their drivers of growth in a green growth pathway so that they can create jobs, they can grow sustainably, and if let's not hope so in future we experience what we are experiencing now, this could be tackled in a more efficient way.
Very, very detailed answer there. Now, Mr. Marshall, what are those areas, those sectors that a government like Rwanda's is trying to prioritize and thinks should be part of a new global Green Deal?
Yeah, I think Daniel explained it well. There are various sectors, especially as on environmental perspective. We are talking about the green jobs. We are talking about recycling, renewable energy, electric mobility, the renewal of the motorized, non-motorized transport. We are talking about the smart agriculture. We are talking about even the forestry, ecosystem restoration. We are talking about, there are many sectors which really can be revamped and worked. Even we are talking also about investment even in green or in sectors like tourism, ecotourism, recreation. These sectors which really are environmental friendly, but which also can even create the green jobs to the community.
Luther, what could, a Green Deal look like in a developing country context?
Well, first of all, a Green Deal for a developing country context, I think, should take into consideration the fact that if we are to place nature at the center of a green economy, we need to look at natural resources from a sustainable way, which means that from the way we value them, natural resources, from the way we use them, and from the way we manage them. And if we take that approach, then it means that we will be able to build our economies based on that advantage. And actually, for developing countries like Africa, I do think that this is a huge opportunity to diversify our supply chains and just make sure, if you look at the global supply chain at the moment, it is tinted towards an effect. I mean, it is skewed to the disadvantage of developing countries, because we do have lots of raw materials which we are not actually able to develop. But with reflections on post-COVID and with reflections of moving to a Green Deal and ensuring that we bring nature at the center of our green economy, we could rethink the production, our production chains and processes, and ensure that actually the continent can be a base for for production and supply to the rest of the world. The other bit is that I do think that when we do value our natural resources, a Green Deal would make sure that we do not get cut in terms of how we negotiate for the value of our resources, and that is quite important.
Luther, staying with you there, you have the issue of fossil fuels, the big corporations. How do you get these players on board?
I think just the recognition that, first of all, we need to go just beyond reducing our carbon footprint. I think the conversation is really to address some of the underlying root causes of what we are struggling with, and bringing them certainly on board would be important in the sense that the global economy, how it's been constructed, has been greatly dependent on fossil fuels. But looking at sustainable development, so looking at sustainable economies from a foundational perspective, would mean that an engagement needs to happen, and that engagement needs to look at the shifts, which luckily enough are already promoted by the innovations which have taken place. And these innovations actually point to the fact that we can do without fossil fuels. There are other alternative technologies, and these technologies just need to be, they just do require an uptake. And I think that's what's quite key. So it may not necessarily be engaging institutions that deal with fossil fuels, but it is more engaging with the new promise of building up the uptake for alternative technologies.
I'll bring you back into the conversation, Mr. Daniel. We were talking about many countries are talking about spending huge amounts of money to recover from the pandemic, the need to deliver new jobs and businesses. But how do we channel this through a clean, green transition? How practical is it?
Thank you. I think when you look at most of the recovery plans or stimulus packages that are being developed, or those that are already announced, you'll see that most of them are still at a very strategic or high level, which is fine because it brings hope that there will be a way forward. But to get into the practicality of implementing those, who need now unpacking them into sector or multi cross-cutting areas where you now start thinking, if, for example, in the last decade or 2 decades, I've run this sector this way, and this is what the results are, what can I do to make it more sustainable? I mean, we are dealing with the situation where we have countries that are dependent for their foreign exchange earnings on fossil fuel. Now, such countries will need to look closely on how they can practically improve their economy through a green growth path, thereby saying, whichever sector that will be my focus, I should look at it from a very critical aspect to ask the hard questions of what is it that we can do better, even though the results may not be immediate. But at least when we look back 10 years, in front, we will say, yes, there has been a shift. So like I said before, this could be in areas of, urbanization, cities are like where, we draw the magnets of everybody who wants to live the so-called good life. So, but when you look at cities, buildings, for example, haven't been done the right way. So, but there have been good systems. For example, the Rwandan government, adopted last year what is called a green building minimum compliance. This, system is very, very specific to Rwanda in the sense that Rwanda could harness, their good weather instead of you having buildings where you have to install air conditioners that are energy guzzlers. You build or orient your house in the right direction. In agriculture, there are innovations, interventions that are bringing in technology. For example, some strategies or recovery plans are talking of providing fertilizers to farmers. Now, how can we shift some of those investments from saying instead of focusing 100% on chemical fertilizers, we revive our small businesses that are dealing with inorganic fertilizers, composting. There are lots of small businesses that could, benefit from this. This is just a few examples. But when you go to practicality, sector plans that will implement these recovery plans will determine whether a country will see its economy growing in a green growth path.
Mr. Marshall, you're the representative of the government in here. Now, Rwanda has been very big on the green economy direction and green growth in that regard. But now, how do you incorporate climate risks and opportunities into things like the financial system, as well as aspects of public policy making and infrastructure? How is Rwanda doing that? With some examples, please.
You put it like Rwanda really realized from the first instance that there is no way climate change won't affect any of the sectors, and took a big step by even putting up legal and mechanism, starting by we have since 2011 green growth and the climate resilience strategy, which put clear pillars on how the economy or Rwanda is going to deal with climate change within the various sectors. Rwanda also acknowledged that finance and investment in green job is a pillar to sustain or to fund various activities. And Rwanda also have a green fund, which has so far mobilized more than 100 million USD to fund these highly green and very activities which deal with climate change and environment management. To some, the various innovative projects rising from waste management, e-waste management, smart agriculture. There are various projects which are being supported just in that line. You heard also about the plastics. We are moving also toward reducing or banning. We are among the first country in East Africa who pushed even to ban the plastics. And I think these are the innovative solutions which are helping also to cope with the climate change. We are also talking about the forest management. We are investing much in ecosystem restoration. We know most of our ecosystems have been threatened, and if if I can remember you, today is the International Day of Biodiversity, and the slogan of the day is the solutions are in nature. Rwanda is aware that we can't go away without having a clean and safe environment, and some investments are being put in ecosystem restoration, forest management. We are now having a country with 30% with forest cover, and that doesn't come as a gift. It's something which you fight for, you maintain, and you educate people to really maintain this forest cover.
Mr. Marshall, staying with you there, you're talking quite a lot, and I want Daniel to dive into this as well after. In regards to investment, most of the investment you're talking about is investment into the future, not investment in past economic principles that might have worked for the growth. Now, don't we risk falling into a bigger challenge of larger proportions of income inequality?
I don't think so. Of course, you need to balance and you need to be cautious on how you can balance. It's not only about investing in one sector, it's about looking in an integrated manner, as earlier Daniel mentioned. We are not only focusing on key economic sectors. We are looking and we are working with various sectors to make sure that it doesn't bring up these inequalities, as you mentioned. Of course, there is an ongoing monitoring, and there is just check to see whether whatever you are doing is yielding fruits. To me, I don't see it on a pessimistic view. I see it as long as we learn, we create jobs, or we invest, we have also to have a clear monitoring and verification system to make sure that whatever we are doing doesn't affect other sectors.
Daniel, your view on this?
When you look at it for the fact that the continent is made up of a greater percentage of the demographics, youths, this investment should be targeting innovations that are coming out from small businesses, civil society organizations. It shouldn't only be focusing on the big corporations or conglomerates that have, driven growth. So what it means is that in order to ensure that this becomes an opportunity to bridge this inequality gap, we should be able to look broadly into our countries, the sectors, and encourage even a bigger population of the youth to get engaged, whereby this investment, whether it be in a form of capacity building, providing seed investment to small businesses that have passing maybe proof of concept, but also bringing more hope that the governments across the globe are interested in driving growth inclusively, especially involving youth, women, will ensure that we don't fall back to this trap of inequality. And I think when you look closely to some of the policies that have been raised or made as a post-COVID recovery plan, some countries are already thinking in that direction. But as we usually say, the devil is in the details. So implementation will determine whether we really hit the nail at the head to carry everyone along in order to bridge the inequality that is a challenge with the business as usual way of growth.
Luther, you have a younger generation that seems to be more aware of the effects of climate change to them and the societies around them and their future as well. But my question here is, who is going to lead the change? I'll give you a scenario of the recent elections in South Korea, whereby the party that won the elections campaigned based off a green agenda, pushing for a greener South Korea. And majority of their voters were below the age of 25. Now, they won the elections there. Now, that's an example of young people trying to push for this change. But in other countries with much older age groups, who's going to lead this change and who's going to lead the movement towards a greener world?
First of all, before I go to that question, on just the issue of social inclusion, it is certainly a very, very important aspect here in tackling inequality, and it shouldn't be business as usual as we go forward. That the new interventions and the new response to COVID-19 should not actually create more disparity. And this can be addressed by looking at evidence that identifies the most vulnerable and also what they require and provide targeted interventions. That's really key in terms of actualizing that specific ambition. Now, coming back to young people, who is going to bring the change? Change is always brought by the people themselves. And I think that the young people leading the change is the only way forward. And there are spaces for which young people can actually take up. And we have seen many movements of young people, even on the continent here, growing. First of all, in terms of numbers, the young people are definitely advantaged because the numbers are there. And the movements are beginning to grow. Lots of platforms are being set up on social media and in other forms. And I think that is where the hope is, that actually the young people themselves cannot be observers, but actually have to be participants.
Mr. Marshall, as your parting shots in this situation, what's the time frame of ensuring that we move into this green economy and having it sustainable?
Putting time might be a bit difficult because Africa countries are not on the same pace, and but I think it's important also that we go hand in hand with implementing these international agreements like SDGs. To me, I think it's as fast as possible, but we need also to take a clear and realistic time frame in terms of looking at the capacity development, looking at the financial availability, and looking at the other targets which are set worldwide, so that we don't either duplicate our efforts or we don't divert from the agreed standards. So it will be challenging to have a kind of time frame for various countries, but I think it's as we mentioned even earlier as the pandemics is going to ease, it's important that we really have a clear and a very fast recovery plan, and we mobilize funds to make sure that within the near future, things should be back on track.
Mr. Luther Ankur, as your parting shots there, what is the time frame, a realistic time frame for a sustainable green economy world?
Well, a sustainable green economy world is not a short-term, we don't need to look at it from a short-term lens. We have to look at it from a long-term perspective, because then we need to look at the fact that all our various human actions cumulatively result into either detrimental or a positive effect. And this lens helps us to take into consideration actions that we cumulatively engage in and the decision at this point. And I think that what will be critical is ensuring that whatever actions are going to be taken must take into consideration the conservation of ecosystems and biodiversity as being a very strong foundation for sustainable economies, and ensuring that there's certainly a recognition of ecosystem resilience, social equity, and natural capital as being foundational to the green economy.
Thank you there, Luther. And Mr. Daniel Okechukwu, parting shots, time frame on sustainability.
When you look at issue of a time frame on sustainability, the fact is that countries across the globe do have both their medium and long-term strategies, visions. What I believe is that there are two things that could determine how fast or how slow we go in terms of having a green economic growth in different parts of the world. And those are, one, the ability of countries to work together, that's partnership, but also the resources that are available. So if we look at it from the fact that, what we are passing through now in regards to the COVID-19 have shown that a lot of resources will be needed to bring back economic activities in a green growth manner in different parts of the world. But also, this will mean each and everyone working together to ensure that we meet this goal, whether it be in the medium term within the plans that we are being put forward, or in the longer term as a region or a globe. So, but I am optimistic that there is already a move towards that direction, and the part each country will play in these two areas in terms of partnership and resource mobilization will determine the time frame.
Thank you very much there, Mr. Okechukwu. Daniel, gentlemen, really loved the conversation. Unfortunately, it has to come to one end, but thank you for your time. Marshall Banamwana, Acting Director General Environment and Climate Change at the Rwanda Ministry of Environment. Mr. Luther Anukuru, he is a Regional Director for Eastern and Southern Africa, IUCN. And Mr. Okechukwu Daniel Ogbanaya, the Lead Program Coordinator at GGI Rwanda. Gentlemen, thank you for your time. You've been watching CNBC Africa. You can tweet us at CNBC Africa. For more on this conversation, or tweet me directly at The Real Quizera. Have a great day.